Hey y'all, so I just finished reviewing for one of my subjects and I want to read this Stories of Detection and Mystery by Agatha Christie and other authors, which is like a collection of mystery stories in one book. So this book smells nice. So I'm going to read Philomel, Cottage by Agatha Christie. So it says here, "Goodbye, my love. Goodbye, my dearest." Alex Martin leaned over the small garden gate and watched the figure of her husband grow smaller as he walked down the road in the direction of the village. Soon he turned a bend and disappeared, but Alex still stayed in the same position with a dreamy, faraway look in her eyes. Alex Martin was not beautiful. She was not even particularly pretty, but there was a joy and softness in her face which her friends from the past would have not recognized. Alex had not had an easy life. For 15 years, from the age of 18 until she was 33, she had had to look after herself, and for 7 years of that time, her sick mother as well. She had worked as a secretary and she had been neat and businesslike, but the struggle had brought lines to her young face. It was true that she had a sort of love affair with Windyford, another clerk. Although they had seemed to be just good friends, Alex knew in her heart that he loved her. But Dick had to work hard in order to save enough money to send a younger brother to a good school. They could not think of marriage yet. Then, suddenly, the girl was delivered from the dullness of her everyday life in the most surprising manner. A cousin died and left all her money, a few pounds, to Alex. This gave Alex freedom, an easier life, and ability to make her own decisions. Now she and Dick did not need to wait any longer to be married. But Dick behaved strangely. He had never spoken directly to Alex of his love for her, and now he seemed to have less desire than ever to do so. He avoided her and became silent and unhappy. Alex was quick to realize the truth. She had become a wealthy woman, and Dick's pride would not allow him to ask her to be his wife. She liked him none the worse for it, and was actually thinking about suggesting marriage herself, when the second surprising thing happened to her. She met Gerald Martin at a friend's house. He fell violently in love with her, and within a week he had asked her to marry him. Alex, who had always considered herself calm and sensible, was completely swept off her feet. She had, by chance, found a way to excite Dick Winterford's emotions. He had come to her almost speechless with anger. "The man's a complete stranger to you. You know nothing about him." "I know that I love him." "How can you know? In a week? It doesn't take everyone 11 years to find out that they're in love with a girl," cried Alex angrily. His face went white. "I've loved you ever since I met you. I thought that you felt the same about me." Alex was truthful. "I thought so too," she admitted, "but that was because I didn't know what real love is." Then Dick had exploded again, shouting first prayers and then threats against the man who had taken his place. Alex was shocked to see how strong the feelings were of the man whom she had thought that she knew so well. As she leaned on the gate of the little house on this sunny morning, her thoughts went back to the conversation. She had now and again. There were moments of anxiety which darkened her perfect happiness, and the cause of that anxiety was Dick Windyford. 3 times since her marriage, she had dreamed the same dream. Although the place was different on each occasion, the main facts were always the same. She saw her husband lying dead and Dick Windyford standing over him, and she knew quite clearly that Dick who had struck him down. But if that was terrible, there was something more terrible still, although in the dream it seemed completely natural. She, Alex Martin, was glad that her husband was dead. She stretched out grateful hands to the murderer and sometimes she thanked him. The dream was always ended in the same way, with herself held in Dick Windyford's arms. She had said nothing about this dream to her husband, but secretly it troubled her more than she liked to admit. Was it a warning? A warning against Dick Windyford? Alex was woken from her thoughts by the sharp sound of the telephone ringing in the house. She went inside and picked up the receiver. Suddenly she felt pain and put out a hand against the wall. Who did you say was speaking? Why, Alex, what's the matter with your voice? I hardly recognize it. It's Dick. Oh, said Alex. Oh, where are you? At the Traveler's Arms. That's the right name, isn't it? Or don't you even know of the existence of your village inn? I'm on holiday and doing a bit of fishing here. Would you have any objections if I came to see you both in this evening? This evening after dinner? No, said Alice sharply. You mustn't come. There was a pause, and then Dick spoke again. I beg your pardon, he said formally. Of course I won't trouble you, Alex interrupted quickly. He must think that her behavior was strange, and it was. I only meant that we are busy tonight, she explained, trying to make her voice sound as natural as possible. Will you come to dinner tomorrow night? But Dick had noticed the lack of warmth in her voice. Thanks very much, he said, as formally as before, but I may leave any time. I'm expecting to be joined by a friend. Goodbye, Alex. He paused and then added quickly, with his old friendliness, best of luck to you, my dear. Alex put the phone down with a feeling of relief. He mustn't come here, she repeated to herself. He mustn't come here. Oh, what a fool I am to get into a state like this. But even so, I'm glad that he's not coming. She picked up an old hat from the table and went out into the garden again, pausing to look up at the name which was cut into the stone above the front door, Philomel Cottage. It's a strange name, isn't it? She had said to Gerald once before they were married. He had laughed. You little town girl, he said lovingly. I don't believe that you've ever heard a nightingale. I am glad that you haven't. Nightingales should only sing for lovers. We'll hear them together on a summer's evening outside our own home. And when Alex, standing in the doorway of their home, remembered how they had heard them, she smiled happily. It was Gerald who had found Philomel Cottage. He had come to Alex full of excitement about it. He told her that he had found a perfect house for them, a real jewel of a place, and when Alex had seen it, she too fell in love with it. It was true that it was in rather a lonely position. It was 2 miles from the nearest village, but the house itself was wonderful. It was attractive to look at, and it had a comfortable bathroom, a good hot shower system, electric light, and telephone. But then they had a great disappointment. Gerald found out that the owner, although a rich man, would not rent it to them. He would only sell it. Gerald Martin had plenty of family money, but he was only able to use the income from it. He could lay his hand on no more than £1,000. The owner wanted 3,000, but Alex, who had set her heart on the house, suddenly stepped in. She gave half of her money in order to buy the home. So Philomel Cottage had become their own, and Alex had not felt for a minute that she had made the wrong choice. It was true that servants did not like the loneliness of the country. Actually, the moment they had none at all. But Alex, who had little life before, thoroughly enjoyed cooking lovely meals and looking at the most beautiful flowers, was cared for by an old man from the village who came twice a week. As she turned the corner of the house, Alex was surprised to see the old gardener busy in the flower beds. She was surprised because his days for the works were Mondays and Fridays, and today was Wednesday. "What are you doing here, George?" she asked as she came towards him. "I thought that you'd be surprised, but there's a country show near here on Friday. So I said to myself that neither Mr. Martin nor his good wife would mind if I come for once on a Wednesday instead of a Friday." "That's quite all right," said Alex. "I hope that you'll enjoy yourself at the show." "I intend to," said George simply. "But I did think too that I'd see you before you went away to find out what you want me to do with the flower borders. You haven't any idea when you'll be back, I suppose." "But I'm not going away." George looked at her in surprise. "Aren't you going to London tomorrow?" "No." "What gave you such an idea?" "I met Master going down to village yesterday. He told me that you were both going away to London tomorrow, and it was uncertain when you'd be back again." "Nonsense," said Alex, laughing. "You must have misunderstood him." Just the same, it made her think about exactly what Gerald could have said for the old man to make such strange mistake. Going to London? She never wanted to go to London again. "I hate London," she said suddenly and bitterly. "Ah," said George calmly. "I must have been mistaken somehow. But you said it quite plainly, it seemed to me. I'm glad that you're staying here. I don't approve of all this moving about, and I don't like London at all. I've never needed to go there. Too many motor cars. That's the trouble these days. As soon as people have got a motor car, they can seem to stay still anywhere. Mr. Ames, who used to have this cottage, was a peaceful gentleman until he bought one of those things. He hadn't had it a month before he put this cottage up for sale. He'd spent a lot of money on it too, putting in electric light and things like that. "You'll never get your money back," I said to him. "But," he said to me, "I'll get £2,000 for this house." And he did certainly. And he certainly did. He got £3,000, said Alex, smiling. £2,000, repeated George. There was a talk at the time about the amount that he wanted. "It was really 3,000, said Alex. "Ladies never understand figures," said George firmly. "You're not going to tell me that Mr. Ames asked you for 3,000? "He didn't ask me," said Alex. "He asked my husband." "The price was 2,000, he said with determination. Alex did not argue with him anymore. She moved across to one of the other beds and began to pick a bunch of flowers. As she moved towards the house, Alex noticed a small, dark green object lying on the ground. She stopped and picked it up, recognizing it was her husband's notebook. She opened it. She opened it and looked rapidly through it with some amusement. Almost forgotten the beginning of her married life with Gerald, she had realized that although he was quick and emotional, he was also unexpectedly neat and organized. He demanded that his meals were served on time and always planned his day with great care. As she looked through the notebook, Alex smiled to see the entry for 14th May. Mary Alex St. Peter's, 2:30. She laughed and turned the pages. Suddenly she stopped. Wednesday, 18th June. That's the day. In the space for the day, Gerald had written in his neat, exact hand, 9 p.m. Nothing else. What did Gerald plan to do at 9 p.m.? Alex thought about it. She smiled to herself and realized that if this had been a detective story, the notebook would have contained some unpleasant surprises. One of them would have been the name of another woman. She turned back the pages carelessly. There were dates, appointments, short notes on business matters, but only one woman's name, her own. But as she slipped the notebook into her pocket, she carried the flowers into the home. She felt a slight anxiety. She remembered Dick Winterford's words almost as though he were beside her, repeating them. The man's a complete stranger to you. You know nothing about him. It was true. What did she put what did she know about him after all? Gerald was 40. In 40 years there must have been other women in his life. Alex shook herself impatiently. She must not think like this. She had a more urgent matter to deal with. Ought she ought she not tell her husband that Dick Windyford had telephoned her? It was just possible that Gerald had already met him in the village. But in the case, he would be sure to mention it to her immediately on his return, and she could then safely tell him about the phone call. If he did not, what? Alice felt Alex felt a strong desire to say nothing about it. If she told him, he was sure to suggest that they should invite Dick Windyford to Philomel Cottage. Then she would have to explain that Dick had asked if he could come, and that she had made an excuse to prevent him. And when he asked her why she had done so, what could she say? Should she tell him her dream? But he would only laugh, or to make matters worse, he could see that she thought it was important. In the end, although she felt rather ashamed, Alex decided to say nothing. It was the first secret that she had ever kept from her husband, and she felt very uncomfortable about it. When she heard that Gerald returning from the village at lunchtime, Alex hid her confusion by hurrying into the kitchen and pretending to be busy with the cooking. She realized that immediately Gerald had not seen Dick Windyford. She was relieved, but she remained a little anxious because she had to prevent Gerald from learning what had happened. It was not until they had finished their simple evening meal and were sitting in the living room with the windows open in order to let in sweet night air and the smell of the flowers that Alex remembered the notebook. Here's something that you've been watering the flowers with, she said and threw it to him. I dropped it in the flower bed, did I? Yes, I know all your secrets. Now, not guilty, said Gerald, shaking his head. What about your secret business at 9 o'clock tonight? Oh, that. He seemed surprised for a moment, and then he smiled as if he had a particularly amusing thought. It's a meeting with a special nice girl, Alex. She's got brown hair and blue eyes, and she's very like you. I don't understand, said Alex, pretending to be severe. You're avoiding the point. No, I'm not. As a matter of fact, it's an order to remind myself that I'm going to develop some photographs tonight, and I want you to help me. Gerald Martin was very interested in photography and had an excellent but rather old camera. He developed his photographs in a small room under the house, which he had fitted up for that purpose. And the developing must be done at 9 o'clock exactly, said Alex, laughing. Gerald looked a little annoyed. And dear girl, he said, one should always plan a thing for a certain time. Then one doesn't then one does one's work quickly and properly. Alex sat for a minute or two in silence, watching her husband. He sat back in his chair smoking, with his dark head leaning against and the clear-cut lines on his face standing out against the dark background. And suddenly Alex felt a wave of tears sweep over her, so that she cried out before she could stop herself. Oh, Gerald, I wish that I knew more about you. Her husband looked at her in surprise. But my dear Alex, you do know all about me. I've told you when I was a boy in Northumberland all about my life in South Africa and about this last 10 years in Canada which had made me successful. Oh, business, said Alex, with a wave of her hand to show her lack of interest. Gerald laughed suddenly. I know what you mean, love affairs. You women are all the same. Alex felt her throat go dry and said nervously, well, but there must have been love affairs, if I only knew. There was silence again for a minute or two. Gerald Martin looked worried and undecided. When he spoke seriously, without any sign of his former light-hearted manner. Alex, do you think that it's wise to want to know much? To want to know so much? Yes, there have been women in my life. If I said there were not, you wouldn't believe me. But can swear to you that not one of them was important to me. His voice was so sincere that Alex was comforted. Are you satisfied, Alex? He said with a smile. What's made you think of this tonight especially? Alex got up and began to walk about the room. Oh, I don't know, he said. I've been feeling anxious all day. That's strange, said Gerald in a low voice, as though he was speaking to himself. That's very strange. Why is it strange? Oh, my dear girl, don't turn on me like that. I only said that it was strange because, as a rule, you're so happy and cheerful. Alex forced herself. Uh, Alex forced herself to smile. Everything's done. It's best to annoy me today, she admitted. Even old George had got a hold of some strange idea that we were going away to London. He said that had told him so. Where did you see him? Asked Gerald sharply. He came to work today instead of Friday. The stupid old fool, said Gerald angrily. Alex looked at him in surprise. Her husband's face was twisted with violent anger. She had never seen him like this. When Gerald noticed her shocked expression, he made an effort to regain control of himself. Well, he is an old stupid fool, he complained. What can you have said to make him think that? I I never said anything, at least. Oh, yes, I remember. I made some big joke about going off to London in the morning, and I suppose that he believed me. Or perhaps he didn't hear me properly. You corrected you corrected him, of course. He anxiously waited for her reply. Of course, but he's the sort of old man who doesn't accept correction easily. You told him how certain George had been about the price of the house. Gerald was silent for a minute or two, then he said slowly, Ames was prepared to take £2,000 immediately and to be paid in the remaining 1,000 in small amounts over several months. That's how the mistake started, I expect. Very likely. Alex agreed. Then she looked up at the clock and pointed it with a laugh. We ought to be going we ought to be getting on with the developing, Gerald. It's past 5:09. A very strange smile appeared on Gerald Martin's face. I've changed my mind, he said quietly. I shan't do any photography tonight. A woman's mind is a strange thing. When Alex went to bed on that Wednesday night, her mind was as peaceful, as happy as it had been before Dick Winifred's phone call. But by the evening of the following day, she was feeling anxious again. Dick had not telephoned again, but she felt what she supposed must be his influence at work. Again and again, she seemed to hear those words of his. The man's a complete stranger to you. You know nothing about him. And with them came to the memory of her husband's face and the way he had said, Alex, do you think that it's wise to want to know so much? Why he had said that. There had been a warning in those words. It was though he had said, you had better not try to find out about my past life, Alex. You may get an unpleasant shock if you do. By Friday morning, Alex felt certain that there had been a woman in Gerald's life, and that he had taken great care to hide the fact from her. Her jealousy, which had developed slowly, now became violent. Was it a woman that he had been going to meet that night at 10 p.m.? When he had said that he had been planning to develop photographs, had he had he been lying? 3 days ago she would have sworn that she knew her husband completely. Now it seemed that to her that he was in fact a stranger to her. She remembered his unreasonable anger against Old Church, which had been so different from his usual good temper. Perhaps it was a small thing, but it showed her that she did not really know the man who was her husband. On Friday afternoon there were several little things that Alex needed from the village. She suggested that she should go and buy them while Gerald remained in the garden, but rather to her surprise, he he objected strongly to this plan. He stated that he would go himself while she remained at home. Alex was forced to give way to him, but his determination surprised and worried her. Why was he so anxious to prevent her from going to the village? Suddenly, she thought of an explanation which made the whole thing clear. Was it not possible that, although he had said nothing to her, Gerald actually had met Dick Windyford? Her own jealousy had only developed since her marriage. The same thing might have hap- might have happened to Gerald. He might be anxious to prevent her from seeing Dick Windyford again. This explanation fitted the facts so well, and was so comforting that to Alex's troubled mind, that she accepted it eagerly. But by tea time, she was again feeling uncomfortable. She was struggling with an idea that, to her shame, she had come to her since Gerald left. At last, after she had told herself repeatedly that she ought to tidy Gerald's dressing room, she went upstairs. She took a duster with her hand to pretend that she was being a good housewife. If I was only sure, if I was only sure, she, she repeated to herself, if I could only be sure. She tried to believe that Gerald would have destroyed anything to do with the woman in his past life, but the desire to find out for herself grew stronger and stronger until at last she could no longer stop herself. Although she felt deeply ashamed of herself, she searched the drawers, hunting through packets of letters and papers and even the pockets of her husband's clothes. Only two drawers escaped her. The lower drawer at the dressing table and the smaller right-hand drawer of the writing desk were both locked. But Alex had by now lost all her shame. She was certain that in one of those drawers she would find something connected with this imaginary woman from the past who was driving her crazy. She remembered that Gerald had left his keys lying carelessly on the table downstairs. She brought them upstairs and tried one by one. The third key fitted the drawer of the writing desk. Alex pulled it open eagerly. There was a checkbook and some money in there, and at the back of the drawer a packet of letters tied up with a piece of string. Alex was breathing unsteadily as she untied the string. Then her face turned red and she dropped the letters back into the drawer, closing it and relocking. The letters were her own, which she had written to Gerald Martin before she married him. And then she turned to the dressing table. She did not expect to find what she was looking for, but she wanted to feel that she had not left the search unfinished. Alex was annoyed to find that none of the keys in Gerald's punch fitted this particular drawer, but she had determined not to be defeated. She went around the other rooms in the house and brought back a collection of keys with her. Finally, she discovered that the key of the cupboard in another room also fitted the drawers of the dressing table. She unlocked the lower drawer and pulled it open, but there was nothing in it except a roll of old, dirty newspaper cuttings. Alex breathed more freely, but she looked quickly at the cuttings, because she was interested to know what subject had interested Gerald so much that he had kept them. They were nearly all from American newspapers about 7 years before, and they dealt with the trial of Charles Lemaitre. Lemaitre had been suspected of marrying women in order to murder them for their money. A skeleton had been found beneath the floor of one of the houses which he had rented. What the fuck? And most of the women that he had quote unquote married had never been heard of again. He had defended himself in court with the greatest skill and had been helped by some of the best lawyers in the United States. The court had been unable to prove the main charge of the murder, but had found him guilty of several smaller charges and he had been put in prison. Alice remembered the excitement caused by the case of the time and again some few years later when Lemaitre had escaped from prison. He had never been caught. Oh fuck. The English newspaper had discussed at great length the character of the man and his strange power over women. They had described his excitable behavior in court and mentioned the occasional sudden illnesses caused by his heart condition. There was a picture of man in one of the cuttings, and Alex looked closely. It showed a thoughtful, bearded man. Who was it? The face reminded her of. Suddenly, with a shock, she realized it was Gerald himself. The eyes were just like his. Perhaps he had kept the cuttings up for that reason. She began to read the account beside the picture. It seemed that certain dates had been written in Lemaitre's notebook, and it was suggested that these were the dates on which the women had been murdered. In court, the witness had stated that Lemaitre could be recognized by the mark of an old injury on the inside of his left wrist. Alex grabbed the papers and put out a hand to support herself. Her husband had a mark on the inside of his left wrist. The room seemed to spin around her. Gerald Martin was Charles Lemaitre. She knew it and accepted it in a flash. Unconnected facts suddenly fitted together. The money that had been paid for the house was all hers, and she had trusted him with the rest of her money. Even her dream now had a meaning. Deep down, although she had never unconsciously known it, she had always feared Gerald Martin. She had wished to escape from him and had consciously wanted Dick Ford's help. That, too, was why she had accepted the truth so easily. Without doubt or further thought, the Matre had meant to kill her too. Very soon, perhaps. She almost cried as she remembered something. Wednesday, 9 p.m. The room under the house, with the floor stones which could be raised so easily. Once before, he had buried a body under a floor. It had all been planned for Wednesday night, but was he crazy, writing down the date and time in his notebook? No, Gerald always wrote down his business appointments. To him, murder was a form of business. But what had saved her? What could possibly had saved her? Had he changed his mind the last meeting? No, she realized immediately. Old George. She understood now her husband's burst of uncontrollable anger. No doubt he had prepared the way by telling as many people as possible that they were going to London the next day. And then George had come to work unexpectedly. He had mentioned London to her, and she said that the story was untrue. It would have been too risky to murder her that night. If old George was likely to repeat the conversation, but what an escape. If she had not happened to mention that little matter, Alex trembled. But she had no time to waste. She must get away immediately before he came back. She quickly replaced the roll of cuttings in the drawer and shut it and locked it. But then she froze. She heard the noise of the garden gate. Her husband had returned. For a moment, Alex did not move. Then she walked softly to the window and looked out from behind the shelter of the curtain. Yes, it was her husband. He was smiling to himself and singing a little song. He held in his hand an object which almost stopped the beating of her heart. It was a new spade. Alex understood immediately. It would be tonight, but there was still a chance. Gerald, still singing, went around to the back of the house. She didn't wait. She ran down the stairs out and out of the house. But just as she came out of the front door, her husband appeared around the other side of the house. "Hello," he said. "Where are you running off to in such a hurry?" Alex did her best to remain calm as usual. Her opportunity had gone for a moment, but it would come again later if she took care not to make him suspicious, even now perhaps. "I was going to walk at the end of the road and back," she said, in a voice which sounded big and uncertain to her own ears. "All right," said Gerald. "I'll come with you." "No, please, Gerald. I'm not feeling too well. I'd rather go alone." Look at her. She thought she saw a flash of suspicion in her eyes. "What's the matter with you, Alex? You're pale and you're shaking." "Nothing." She forced herself to smile and sound confident. "I've got a headache, that's all. A walk will do me good." "Well, it's no good for you saying that you don't want me," said Gerald, laughing. "I'm coming whether you want me or not." Damn. She did not dare object anymore. If he suspected that she knew. With an effort, she managed to regain something of her normal manner, but she had an uncomfortable feeling that he was looking at her every now and then out of the corner of his eyes, as if his suspicion had not still completely disappeared. When they returned to the house, he made her lie down and he cared for her like any loving husband. Alex felt helpless, as if she was in a trap with her hands and both feet tied. He would not leave her alone for a minute. He went with her to the kitchen and helped her to bring in the simple cold dishes which he had already prepared. She knew now that she was fighting for her life. She was alone with this man. Help was miles away, and she was completely in his power. Her only chance was to calm his suspicions so that he would leave her alone long enough to reach the telephone in the hall and call for help. That was her only hope for now. She had a moment of hope as she remembered how he had given up his plan before. She was on the point of telling him that Dick Winterford was coming up to see them that evening, but she realized that it would be useless. The murderer would not be stopped at a second time. There was a determination in his calm behavior that made her feel sick with fear. He would simply murder her immediately and telephone Dick Winterford with the story that they had been called away suddenly. Oh, if Dick Winterford would come to the house this evening, if Dick... A sudden idea came to her mind. She looked sharply at her husband, as though she was afraid that he would understand what was in her mind. Now that she had formed a plan, her courage returned and she was able to behave naturally again. She made the coffee and they took it outside as they always did when it was a fine evening. "Oh yes," said Gerald suddenly. "We'll do those photographs later." Alex's blood seemed to go cold, but she simply replied, "Can't you manage alone? I'm rather tired tonight." "It won't take long," he smiled to himself. "And I can promise you that you won't feel tired afterwards." What a sentence! The words seemed to amuse him. Alex closed her eyes. She had to carry out her plan now. "I'm just going to telephone the butcher," she told him. "The butcher? At this time of night?" "Oh, of course. His shop's shut. But I can ring him at home. Tomorrow is Saturday, and I forgot to ask him to bring me some meat for the weekend. The dear old man will do anything for me." She passed quickly into the house, closing the door behind her. She heard Gerald say, "Don't shut the door," and replied cheerfully, Are you afraid that I'm going to make love to the butcher? As soon as she was inside, she picked up the phone and asked for the number of the traveler's arm. She was connected immediately. Mr. Winterford, is he still there? May I speak to him? Then her heart began to beat more quickly. The door was opened and her husband came into the hall. Don't go away, Gerald, she said angrily. I don't hate anyone to listen when I'm telephoning. He just laughed and sat down in a chair. Are you sure it's really the butcher that you're telephoning? He laughed. Alex felt real terror. Her plan had failed. In a minute, Dick Windyford would come to the phone. She should she take a risk and cry out for help? In her anxiety, she began to press one of the buttons onto the phone. Up and down immediately another plan flashed into her head. When the button was pressed down, the voice could not be heard in the end. But it was up. It could. It would be difficult, she thought to herself. I must keep calm. I must keep calm. Think of the right words and not pause for a moment. But I believe that I can do it. I must do it. And that at the minute she heard Dick Windyford's voice at the end of the other line. Alex took a deep breath. Then she spoke. Mrs. Martin speaking, from Philomel Cottage. Please come. She pushed the button. Tomorrow morning with a good cut of lamb for 2 people. Button up. It's very important. Button down. Thank you so much, Mr. Hexworthy. I hope that you don't mind me ringing up so late. But the meat is really a matter of button up, life and death, button down. Very well. Tomorrow morning, button up as soon as possible. She replaced the receiver and faced her husband, breathing so hard. So that's how you talk to your butcher, is it? Said Gerald. It's a woman's touch. She was shaking with excitement. He had suspected nothing. They could come, even if he didn't understand. She walked into the sitting room and switched on the light. Gerald followed her. You seem to be in very high spirits now, he said, watching her with interest. Yes, said Alex. My head aches gone, she said. She sat down in her usual seat and smiled at her husband as he sank into his own chair opposite to her. She was safe. It was only 25 minutes past 8. Dick would arrive long before 9 o'clock. I didn't like the coffee that you gave me very much, Gerald complained. It tasted bitter. It was a new kind that I was trying. We won't have it again if you don't like it, dear. Alex picked up some sewing. Gerald read a few pages of his book, and then looked up at the clock and put it away. 8:30. It's time to go downstairs and start work. The sewing slipped from Alex's finger. Oh no, not yet. Let's wait until 9 o'clock. No, my girl. 8:30. That's the time that I fix. You'll be able to go to bed earlier. But I'd rather wait until 9. You know if that I fix the time. I always stick to it. Come. Come along, Alex. I'm not going to wait a minute longer. Alex looked up at him. His hands were shaking and his eyes shining with excitement, and his tongue kept moving across his dry lips. He no longer tried to hide his eagerness. Alex thought, it's true, he can't wait. He really is crazy. He seized her by the shoulder and he pulled her to her feet. Come on, my girl, or I'll carry you there. He spoke brightly, but there was a power in his voice that was terrible. With a great effort, she pushed him away and pressed herself back against the wall. She was helpless. She couldn't get away. She couldn't do anything, and he was coming towards her. Now, Alex. No, no, she cried out loud, trying hopelessly to keep him away from her. Gerald, stop. There's something I've got to tell you, something important. He didn't stop. Important? he said with interest. Then a look of anger appeared on his face. A former lover, I suppose. No, said Alex. Something else. Something else. I expect that you'd call it, yes, you'd call it a crime. She immediately saw that she had said the right thing. His attention was held. As soon as she realized this, her courage returned to her. She felt that it was she felt like she was in control of the situation again. You better sit down again, she said quietly. She herself crossed the room to her old chair and sat down. She even bent down and picked up her sewing. But behind her calmness, she was feverishly inventing a story that would hold his interest until help arrived. I told you, she said slowly, that I had been a secretary for 15 years. That was not completely true. I was not a secretary for all of the time. When I was 22, I met a man, a fairly old man with a little property. He fell in love with me and asked me to marry him. I accepted. We were married. She paused. I persuaded him to insure his life in my name. She saw a sudden look of interest appear on her husband's face. And she went on with increased confidence. During the war, I worked for a time in a hospital. There, I handled all kinds of rare poisons. There was no doubt that Gerald was extremely interested now. A murderer is sure to have an interest in murder. She had taken a fat chance on that and succeeded, and she looked quickly at the clock. It was 25 minutes to 9. There is one poison. It is a little white powder, of which just a very small amount of cost that causes death. You know something about poison, perhaps? She put the question with some anxiety. If he did, she would have to be careful. No, said Gerald. I know very little about them. She was greatly relieved. You have probably heard of a poison called hyoscine, yosin, hosin, hyoscine. I think it's hyoscine. Called hyoscine. The poison that I am speaking of acts in the same sort of way, but afterwards it is impossible to find any sign of it in the body. A doctor would believe that the heart had failed. He stole a small quantity of this poison and kept it. She stopped. Go on, said Gerald. No, I'm afraid I can tell you another time. Now, he said impatiently. I want to hear. We'd been married for a month. I was very good to my old husband. And since he praised me to all the neighbors, everyone knew that I was a gentle wife. I made his coffee every evening, and one evening, when we were alone together, I put a little of the poison in his cup. Alex paused and carefully threaded her needle. She had never acted in her life, but at this moment she was as good as the greatest actress in the world. She was actually living the part of the pitiless poisoner. It was very peaceful. I sat watching him. Once he coughed a little and said that he wanted air. I opened the window, and then he said that he could not move from his chair. In the end, he died. She stopped, smiling. It was 8:45. Surely they would come soon. How much? Said Gerald. Did he insure his life for? About £2,000. I used it unwisely and lost it. I went back to my office work, but I never meant to stay there long. I met another man. He didn't know that I'd been married before. He was a younger man, quite good looking, and he had a bit of money. We were married quietly in Sussex. He didn't want to insure his life, but of course his money would come to me if he died. He liked me to make his coffee just as my first husband had done. Alex smiled thoughtfully and added simply, I make very good coffee. Then she went on. I had several friends in the village where we were living. They were very sorry for me when my husband died suddenly of a heart failure one evening after dinner. I didn't really like the doctor. I don't think that he suspected me, but he was certainly very surprised at my husband's sudden death. This time I received about £4,000, and this time I save it, then you see. But she was interrupted. Gerald Martin was pointing at her with one shaking hand, and his throat with the other. The coffee. It was the coffee. She looked at him in surprise. I understand now why it was bitter. You devil, you poisoned me. His hand seized the arms of the chair. He was ready to jump on her. Alex moved away from him to stand by the fireplace. She was thoroughly frightened again. She opened her lips to tell him the truth, and then paused. In another minute he would attack her. She looked at him steadily with authority. Yes, she said, I poisoned you. Already the poison is working, and at this moment you can't move from your chair. You can't move. If she could keep him there, even for a few minutes. Ah, what was that? She heard footsteps on the road. She heard the noise of the garden gate. Then the footsteps on the fan outside, and the outer door opened. You can't move, she said again. Then she slipped past him and rushed from the room to floor, fainting to Dick Windyford's arm. Good heavens, Alex, he cried. Then he turned to the man with a tall he turned to the man with him, a tall, strong police. Go and see what's been happening in that room. He laid Alex down carefully in the chair, and bent over her. My little girl, he said softly. My poor little girl, what have they been doing to you? Her eyelids moved once, and her lips just whispered his name. The policeman returned and touched Dick on the arm. There's nothing in that room, sir, except a man sitting in there. It looks like as if he had some kind of bad shot. And yes, well, sir, he's dead. There was surprise suddenly to Alex's voice, and in the end, she said, as if she was in a dream, he died. What? How? So, let me try to Google that. Agatha Christie. It's nice. Okay, so it's like says here that it's a classic example of murder by suggestion, where the victim is manipulated into causing their own death.